Welcome back to Refit and Sail. My name's George, the Solent Boat Butler, and in this episode we're going to be finishing off the engine bay, finally. In the last episode you have seen me take the engine out. I have done a whole load of work in there. I had to sort out a problem with the skeg void that is right at the back of the engine bay. I've reinstalled a bulkhead, I've put new sound insulation in there, I've flow coated all the insides, I've remade the engine beds using an engine jig so that the alignment will be okay, and finally in this episode hopefully I will have some correct engine mounts, because I got sent the wrong ones by my supplier last time, and I'll be able to get the engine back in, aligned with the shaft. There's a brand new shaft that's also going into the boat, and we can finally say the engine bay is done. Keep watching for more Contessa engine bay fun. Well, as you can see, there's an engine in the boat, so I'm quite pleased we dropped that in yesterday, and I also have some correct engine mounts. So I've been sent 4 of these, which are the right ones. If you saw my last episode, I got sent the wrong ones, which is why the engine is here and not in there. So I'm going to get on with getting the engine in the hole today and do the engine alignment. Explaining how to do an engine alignment is not a very easy thing to do. It's going to be easier to show you, but unfortunately showing you is also going to be quite difficult because of getting camera angles on where I'm going to be able to put a camera in the engine bay that isn't in my way to do the job. Typically it's slightly easier to do an engine alignment with 2 people, because you can have one person at the back with feeler gauges and adjusting the back legs on the engine, and one person at the front adjusting the front legs, and it just saves that climbing in and out and in and out of the quarter berth or the cockpit locker all the time. So the first critical bit of getting the engine aligned to the prop shaft is the prop shaft ideally wants to be centralised in the stern tube. Now on the outside of the boat, the prop shaft is sitting in a brand new cutlass bearing, and on the inboard end the prop shaft is held in the stern tube centrally with a little plastic machined bung, which I will remove after the engine alignment is done. Now to adjust the location of the engine has 4 engine mounts, and you can adjust the height on there, and you can adjust sort of the location using these slots here. And what I'll be trying to do initially is get the gearbox in the hole and get the central point of the gearbox flange and the central point of the prop shaft clamp to roughly align with each other, and then they'll to some extent locate with each other. Once I've got that done, I can then start the fine tuning of getting the 2 mating faces to align with each other. So what I might find is they'll come together and they'll be central, but there'll be a gap at the top, or there might be a gap at the bottom, or there might be a gap at the side. So once I've got it located, that's when the fine tuning happens, and we try and get it as close as we can. Normally I try and get the gap between the gearbox and the shaft clamp down to about 0.006 of an inch, something like that. Normally that's achievable, but the thing to remember is that when the boat goes back into the water, most boats do change shape ever so slightly. So if you've got it within 0.006, to be honest with you, I mean, chuck it in the water, it's probably going to be fine, but it's always worth checking, if you can, the alignment after the boat is in the water. Now, the other thing is, once the boat's in the water, I will have a stern gland in the stern tube, not my centering disc that I talked about earlier, so that will allow a further degree of movement. And you just need to remember, if you are adjusting it, you hopefully are only adjusting it a tiny amount, because you want to keep that prop shaft ideally as central in the stern tube as you can. The other thing you want to try and do is try and get the engine roughly level with the boat being roughly level. It's not super critical because you've got to remember this is a sailboat, it leans over when you go sailing. So, but I think it's quite nice to try and get the engine roughly level and in line with the level of the boat. So it's well worth putting a reasonable amount of effort into getting the engine alignment to be as good as possible for two reasons. One, it saves on wear on your cutlass bearing, and secondly, it also helps ensure that your stern gland is able to do its job as easily as possible because it's not being forced out of alignment, and so it makes your stern gland last longer as well. In the case of this engine, it was originally fitted pretty badly, and the prop shaft was actually banging and rubbing against the side of the stern tube, so it was miles out. So that's why I'm having to go through this whole process again, because I've drilled new holes in the engine beds to get the engine aligned roughly where it needs to be, and now I can fine tune it and get it absolutely spot on. Before I put the engine actually in the hole, there is one small job I want to do in the engine bay. I fitted some LED lights in there the other day, but I need to just add some power cable and take that power cable up out of the way, and that's going to be much easier with the engine not quite in the hole. So I'm going to crack on with that, and then it's going to be engine feet on and then engine in the hole. I'm just running it off one of my power tool batteries for a minute, but I'm really pleased with these engine lights. I might get some for my own boat. So there you go, there's two of them up there, two strip LED lights. I've managed to tape all the wiring in down the side there. I'm not sure yet exactly where the wiring's going to run to, so I've got to make a hole down there somewhere at some point for all the engine wiring to come through, but I think they look great, and they're going to make working on the engine for both me fitting it and anyone in the future way easier. Here's that centralising bung I talked about. So that's the prop shaft held centrally. I'm going to go and stick some feet on the engine, and then we can slide the engine in the hole. To protect the new metal engine beds, well, they're not new but freshly painted, I've got some bits of cardboard that I'm temporarily putting on top, because what I'm going to have to do is lift the engine up and then slide it down those metal engine beds. So I'm going to try not to scratch them too much. I suspect I will scratch them and have to touch them up afterwards, but that's life. That's why I kind of prefer stainless steel ones, because you don't have to put any kind of coating on them, and if you scratch them, it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to wiggle the engine back into the hole, get the back feet on the metal engine beds, and then slide it in, hopefully without damaging myself or anything else. When my mate Robin did the drilling and the tapping of the engine beds, he also made me a whole bunch of nice thick washers, and these are actually made out of Lottie's old prop shaft, because we've got a new one. So we were just kind of reusing the material that was there, which was quite convenient. So each of the fixings will get a nice big fat washer and then bolted down. So I'm going to put the first one in on this corner, and then I've got to jiggle it around, and then that one will line up, and then I can chuck the bolts in the back, and then we can see how it all looks. That only needs to be done up loosely just for the moment, so everything can move around. Right, let's see if we can get another front one in. There we go. With the engine in the engine bay, I've had a quick initial look, and I've only just bolted down the front engine mounts at the moment, and I've already picked up the first issue I'm going to have to deal with, which is height, which was something I thought I might struggle with when I was using the engine jig in the previous episode. It is pretty clear from just that picture there. You can see the back of the gearbox is a wee bit too high, and I need to fix that. So first of all, I do have more packing washers underneath. I've got kind of an anti-rattle washer underneath each of these aft engine feet above the nut, but the nut is at its lowest position, so it can't really rattle any further down than necessary, but I wanted it in there in case I needed to adjust up. So I think what I'm going to have to do is slide the engine forward, take those back feet off, take that washer out and put it back in again and see how close it is. And if that doesn't do it, I might have to start thinking about getting that actual nut kind of machined down a little bit to remove some material, but I will try it in the first instance without the washer and see how close I get. So this is the joy of engine alignment and fitting of new or even existing engines. I know this is going to fit because I'm putting it back in with new versions of the mounts that were on it when it came out. All I've done is correct the kind of lateral positioning of those so that I can get it aligned laterally. What I'm just struggling with is getting the height down low enough. So I know it's going to be possible. It's just going to be a case of trial and error to work out the best way of doing it. Well, I have had the engine all the way out again. I have taken the aft feet off. I've removed the washer that was under the engine mount and put the engine mount back on. So there's just a nut there. And that is about sort of 2-3 mil of clearance that I've created. Put the engine back in and I'll show you what it looks like. So with that washer removed, it is looking, perhaps from the angle you're seeing it, as being much better, but unfortunately the engine is still about 4 mil too high. So if I bring the camera down kind of like that, you can see there's a height difference there. So unfortunately, I've run out of now adjustment on the kind of standard mount as it is. So I think what I may do next is take the engine out again, slide it forward, and then I might have to get those nuts machined to make them fit. good news is that modification to the nut on the engine mount has done exactly what I want it to do. The flange on the back of the gearbox is now ever so slightly below the flange on the prop shaft coupling. So I can now wind the engine back up to the height it needs to be and start doing the engine alignment proper in terms of getting the two faces to match each other. So I need to get my feeler gauges out fairly soon. There you go. You can see quite clearly that the gearbox is now ever so slightly lower, so I can now wind up on that nut in there somewhere. Sorry, it's very difficult to actually film this. I'm going to wind up on that bottom nut a little bit and start getting this all aligned properly. And there we go, that's the two mating faces absolutely bang on aligned. I did have it about 6 thou out and needed to drop the front down ever so slightly, and I've just stuck my feeler gauges in there, and actually I can't get them in, so it's virtually, it was so close I ended up cleaning the surfaces of the two mating faces just to see if there was some dirt in there and put them back together again, and there just isn't a gap top, bottom, left, right. So I am happy that that is absolutely bang on, and all I now need to do is just measure how much gap. I'm going to have to twist the phone just to get it in there. I've just got to measure that gap very slightly so I can get my shims made, and then we're going to call the alignment done. With the engine basically done, I'm just going to wait for those shims to get made up. I need to start thinking about all the other stuff that needs to go in, like this water separator. So this is just like a filter because the seawater comes up a seacock, and ideally you want to catch all the seaweed and rubbish before it goes through the engine. And I normally mount these up here, but of course with the sound insulation it's very hard to get a secure firm mounting because, you know, the sound insulation is all kind of squishy like that. So what I do is I get a block of wood which is about the same thickness as the sound insulation. I can then put that on there, draw around it, cut out the sound insulation, and then I can bolt this all the way through, and it will go through the block of wood and have a nice firm base for it to go on. There we go, with a nice little cutout. I can just pop my little block of wood in there. I'm going to put some silver foil tape over that and then drill some holes for the fixings for the water strainer. Christmas has just come and gone, which is why I'm wearing a new Christmas hat. Thank you, Mum. But more importantly, a man who doesn't wear a red suit has made me up the two little spacers, the shims that I need to put under the nuts on the back engine beds. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to climb in, wind those nuts up just probably half a turn, slide the appropriate shim in because one is slightly bigger than the other, crank that nut back down, and then I can check all the alignment again on the shaft coupling to the gearbox coupling, just to check those faces all line up nicely. That's so big. There we go, shims are in under there, you can probably see them, and I've checked the alignment again just to make sure nothing's moved, and that seems all absolutely spot on again, so we're all good. What you didn't see off camera then was that I had to quickly go and modify my spanner, because I climbed up the quarter berth and my spanner wouldn't fit in between the shim and the leg of the engine at the back there. So I quickly ran down to my van, got my angle grinder and a flat disc out, and I removed a couple of mil of material off this because it was just a little bit too fat. And whilst I do advocate buying good quality tools, sometimes tools are expensive, and it is worth buying, you know, some slightly cheaper ones occasionally with things like this, so that you're not too upset when you have to modify it slightly to get the job done. As you can see, I've also had to cut the ring off this one at some point so that I could physically swing it in an engine bay, probably at some point. I can't remember, but I've got a whole box full of random spanners which have been modified, you know, bits chopped off here, bends put in them and all sorts, just to get a job done. I'd also like to thank at this stage all the people that have donated to the Refit and Sale Beer and New Camera Fund. So there is a PayPal link in the description of this video, just down there somewhere, and you can click on that link and you can send me £5, $10, 15 euros, 20 yen, whatever it is. I don't really mind, but I really do appreciate it. It takes quite a bit of time to put these videos together, and if you've learned something from it, or if you've just enjoyed watching me, then I really appreciate it when people buy me a beer as a thank you. And anything that's left over after I've bought as many beers as I need, and I do enjoy beer, that money will go towards better lighting, better camera, and better microphones, which I kind of need. So thank you very much again to those that have donated. Now, on the engine, now I'm not sure how much more I can do on this. I can't plumb the diesel in yet because I need to have a conversation with the owner, because he was making noises about putting a larger diesel tank in, so I don't want to plumb that in yet. On the water side, I don't want to run the hoses down to the seacock because I haven't finished the floor yet, so I don't want to drill a hole and then put new wood over the floor. So the only things I think I can probably do are the exhaust and the control cables, which aren't going to change. So I might just feed them in. But I am also going to bring this video to a close because I didn't get it out on the Christmas weekend. So I'd like to get it out this week because there's lots of people sitting at home in that funny period between Christmas and New Year, and you're not all lucky like me and get to go to work. So I am going to give you something to watch. So I hope you've had a wonderful Christmas. I hope when we get to New Year, it is a good one for you, and I will see you in 2023. Thanks again for watching. Bye for now.